Let's have a look at the different aspects and conditions that have to be fulfilled to make last mile logistics work. First, we will talk about behavior change that is needed to boost the last mile logistics. The partners have talked about that already a little bit. In the second session, we will look at financial, environmental, and social sustainability. After lunch, we will talk about private and public perspectives, and finally about the future of last mile logistics. So in the first session, several pilots will explain the importance of behavior change in order to really realize a shift in urban logistics. There have been 5 workshops about this topic, and it immediately became clear to all of the partners, I think, that it is not all about the hardware, infrastructure, roads, IT, and so forth. Every delivery in urban logistics is also the fruit of a human decision. So if we want to optimize city logistics, we have to work on the minds of the shopkeepers, the investors, the logistics service providers, the suppliers, and the consumers. So Birgit Hendriks from Eco2City will now give us a short introduction on the Agent for Change workshops.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I'm going to tell you a little bit. Yes, Nigel, I'm happy you're here. Thank you. Great.
Good to see you.
Had a good trip, or what?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. I'm going to tell a little bit about changing behavior as far as I can in only 5 minutes. But I'm going to start with a small piece of newspaper from the Netherlands. It's in Dutch, I'm sorry. A couple of years ago, I had to empty the house of my parents. And we found, I think, thousands of newspaper articles my father collected during the whole of his life. And one of these struck me very much in 2 ways, and that's this one. This one, as you can see, he signed it 1972. So that's a huge amount of years ago. And I don't know why he took this piece of newspaper out and collected it, but I realized my drive for clean air has been inherited by my father. I never knew he was interested in clean air, but now I know why. And the second one is more important. This is a short notice on research on what emissions of heavy traffic do to plants. They don't grow and they don't flourish because of emissions. I thought, what about human beings? But this was about plants. But this was in 1972. So we know for years we have to change something because this is not good for plants, and it shouldn't, I think it's not good for human beings as well. So this is my drive, and I know where it comes from now. But then, we've been 40 years later. We are 40 years later now. And we still are struggling with how to optimize city logistics, how to be more efficient, how to be cleaner, and so on. So I think for the last 40 years, we have been using the same thinking that created the problem by trying to solve it. And I think, and these two, so this Mr. Einstein, who stated this a long time ago, I don't know when, he said we shouldn't use the same thinking in solving the problems we've created. So that's why a couple of years ago, when we started talking about this project, we wanted to launch this Agent for Change workshops. Because what Wim already said, we have everything. We have all the techniques, we have electric trucks, we have infrastructure, we have everything. We have IT with smart cities, but we don't use it. Why? Why don't we use this? So that's why I introduced this sort of tour around Europe, touring around the cities where we were supposed to deliver a demonstration, a pilot, and talk with all stakeholders around the table about how should we change behavior? How should we change the decisions people make when it comes to the logistics? Whether it's the small shop logistics in a very small street or whatever, or the big companies like Procter & Gamble, for instance, who's going next to the floor. how do they make their decisions? And then we realized I'm not going to talk about this, during the workshop we used this model. It's very complicated, of course, to explain this to you in 5 minutes, but what we had, and we were accompanied by the guys from Extent, who are the real freight psychologists, I would say, and he gave a sort of an introduction in how human brain works. We are not that rational as we think we are. We don't make rational decisions. We never do. Maybe 1 or 2% of our decisions are really rational, well-thought decisions. All the rest of it is irrational, because you like me or I like you, and that's why I do something for you. Or it's a habit. I've been doing this for 40 years. Why should I change? I don't like change. We don't like change. But we should, because we have to do something. That's what we all agree on here in the room. So that's why we created this model. And of course, if we want to change something, we should start with the people who are really intrinsically motivated. You see it here, over here, in the number 2. The nicest people, of course, are the ones that immediately say, yes, we have to do something. But as we have experienced during the years, it's only 20 out of 100 who are really, from the first step on, motivated to change and to do something different. So then we have to seduce the other 80%. And that's by trying to tease them, to find something that's attractive for them to change their behavior. And that's, of course, on the opposite. But if you have found out something to try out or to get acquainted with a new solution, then you have to give feedback and really create a new habit. And on the other hand, there's always, and that's the bottom line, there's always resistance when it comes to change. And we have to find out, why don't you want to change? What's bothering you? Why do you not change what you're doing? So, and that's, we have to do something with the resistance as well. And talking around the table with all the different stakeholders and receivers, people from local government, from boroughs, from everything, and talking to each other and finding out, why do you behave as you do, and why do you make decisions as you do, and realizing why the others act the way they do. It's been, I think, a huge step towards really going to integrated, clean and efficient city logistics. So that's what happened around the table. And I think in a couple of cities it was really a good start to get something going. So that's for now, and for the rest of the day we will come back to this maybe.
Okay,
yeah?
Thank you, Birgit.
Thank you.
But may I invite you to...
yes?
To take a seat in the panel, and the other people I would like to invite here are Nigel Symonds from the London Borough of Camden. Welcome. Glad you're here. Christophe de Voghel from Brussels Mobilité, and then Frank van Steijvoort, CEO of Eurobrokers, and from Procter & Gamble for the supplier side, Lieven Deketele.
Happy.
I hope you all have a microphone. Yes. Okay.
I don't know.
Welcome to all of you. Frank van Steijvoort, may I start with you? Can you tell us a little bit, what is Eurobrokers? It's a logistic service provider.
Okay. Hello. Eurobrokers is a logistic company. We do storage, distribution of food and spirits in Belgium and Luxembourg, and partly in the Netherlands, and that for the 25 companies in total.
Okay, and a large part of your orders are delivered into the city centers?
A large part, indeed.
Yeah. What is required for behavior change from your organization's perspective?
I think the main requirement for change behavior is that you have to distance yourself from the old patterns, from the old methods of doing distribution. before we entered into the LaMiLo project, all the deliveries have been carried out by our own truck drivers. Taking into account all the challenges, the issues, the problems we encountered during doing the distribution, the traffic congestion with impact on the cost level, the requirements of the receivers of the like the pedestrian zone, like the time windows. In fact. We always thought that what we do ourselves was the best way forward, was the only way forward. In fact, when we evaluated our performance, evaluated the environment where we were working in, we thought we need to change. Going on like we did it before is not the way forward. We have to collaborate. And I think this is really a very mental change from a distribution company, from a logistic service provider. And we always think what we do ourselves is the best way forward. We try to have the only link with our shippers, with our customers, without linking them with our competitors. But really thinking in terms of collaboration is another approach. It's about partnership, and partnership where every partner can focus on its own strengths, and where a logistic company which is specialized in doing urban logistics, urban deliveries, can help us achieving our targets.
Okay, but so the factor that really convinced you was not so much the green argument, but the cost argument and the efficiency argument.
I think it's a combination of both. We have, of course, the pressure of reducing cost, increasing quality, but also if you look to the total environment, you are very visible, like it with your trucks on the road. Also, what people think about your company is very important, because it's also how you are perceived by your consumers, by your customers, by the whole society. And I think in the past it was not that important, but in the future it will be very important.
Okay. Lieven Deketele from Procter & Gamble, what's your experience?
Good morning. Well, first of all, I'm part of Procter & Gamble, but I work specifically there in a group called the Supply Network Innovation Center. And we are a research and development group which looks at how should we prepare for the future in our supply network and our logistics. A bit like Frank was explaining, I mean, we see evolutions in the market. We are usually a company who has, let's say, been quite successful in organizing our distribution in a way that we could consolidate quite good or transportation up to the distribution centers of our customers.
Because you have a lot of goods.
And also because, let's say, we are not supplying immediately to stores usually or to consumers, but we are supplying to big retailers or to smaller retailers to some extent. And that, let's say, the last mile part has been a part which usually has been organized by the retailers in that sense. So what we see is there are some exceptions in the business we do there. I mean, we also supply to hairdresser salons, for example, or to dentists. And there, of course, it's a different logic than if you would supply to a Tesco's or a Carrefour, which has also its own distribution center. And what we see is that indeed with more and more people moving into city centers, we see, let's say, the world population more and more going into urban areas. The challenges are becoming very different to do everything in a sustainable way. So while, let's say, in the past we're like a second line partner often, we also see that the solutions we come up with, where maybe we pack products, for example, in cardboard cases, which are then having to be opened at some point and then distributed to smaller things, is maybe something we do today, but maybe in the future we look at how can we make collaboration up to the last mile more inherent also to the solutions we bring. So can we think of more reusable packaging, for example, which would facilitate how we collaborate? Because the comparison we make in that is for example, in 20 years ago, when we looked at how we were sharing data or sending data to someone, you didn't have the internet. You did have fixed data lines which maybe belong to some companies. Today, everyone is making use of the internet or public transportation in a way that it's inherent to the solution. Because you, as a shipper, have trust in the solution, and also as a receiver, you are more in control. Because I think that's also a part where we need to see how can we make sure that we empower the receiver to tell, if it's a consumer or it's a shop, how do they want to be delivered, when do they want to be delivered, but not in a way that they need to go through complicated process on how can they organize that, but what is the menu of solutions that they can choose from. Because what we see is that it's a tailored approach at a local level. So if I look at what Binnenstad is doing, what I hear is, I mean, the noise level acceptance, for example, at local cities is going to be different in a city like London or Brussels compared to a smaller city. If you take Kortrijk or you take Diest, for example, I'm quoting some examples, but that's the point is it's a story where I think we all have a role to play, and it's a story also where, let's say, behavior change is needed, like you mentioned, but it's also a story where there's no one-fit-all solution, and you need to try to know. Because what I like a lot in the solutions I saw here, and I think it's you need to try, in a complex environment, you need to try things to see what is the effect, and you correct as you experience.
Okay.
So that's really trying out, experimenting, and learning from that is an important element.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to the pilots for a second, because Mr. Symonds, we haven't heard you yet. Whose behavior change was required for your project in order to be successful?
Morning. Yes, a number of stakeholders, Wim. Suppliers is extremely important, that we were able to lever and divert deliveries from suppliers to our consolidation centre. Now over 140 suppliers and couriers are using the service. The way contracts are procured means that we're now saying that we want to take a control over our supply chain, that the council buildings and all their corporate estate receive multiple deliveries from multiple suppliers, and all that supplier is interested in is their goods. But we had taken a bigger view to say we don't want our staff to be receiving these multiple deliveries. We can have a consolidated delivery. So there are a number of different stakeholders that we're interested in, and consumers looking for, they order their item and they want it delivered as soon as they can. So the whole market is driven towards faster, faster, faster. And I think we need to say, no, we need to slow down. But the important thing is raising the awareness of logistics, because a lot of people consider the logistics part is a given. And we all know in this room that it's not. It's one of the hardest parts of the whole supply chain.
Okay, and in your experience, which part of the logistics chain was most difficult to convince?
We did have some challenges convincing the suppliers, however, and there were due to be a couple here today, that actually they can see the benefits. So one of the key drivers for a supplier is if I can deliver my goods on less orders, as in get a higher order value, that's a good thing for a supplier. So we've been able to prove with one of our suppliers, we've placed 800 less orders in 1 year with one supplier, and as a result, the average order value has gone up 30%. So from thinking, oh no, we like our supply chain and they're very good at it, by participating in this way, they've actually seen a benefit. So rather than delivering a few items valued to 15 euros, they're actually delivering 150 euros. So it actually opens opportunities once you get through that resistance, which I think we've all encountered.
Okay, Christophe de Voghel for Brussels. If I understood it well, for you it was more difficult to convince shopkeepers than suppliers, right?
Yeah, and suppliers, they were a bit out of the image for the beginning. We had the transporters, logistic service providers like Frank, and the shopkeepers, who are the receivers in a whole.
And why were they difficult to convince? Because they want to see the goods as they're coming in to the shop, or what was the reason?
Firstly, they don't see the problem. They see the goods
it's
are
not their
coming to
problem.
my shop every day.
Yeah.
And I see that, and I can control my stock, and I can control my orders, and it's it's working like that. And if I have a problem getting my goods because I'm not there, I can ask my neighbor to take it from me or something. They try always to find a little solution for a little problem. They don't see the whole image of it.
Okay.
And otherwise, it's also a complete revolution for them. If you ask them to change their address to the urban consolidation center, and also to remove their stock from the shop to this warehouse, they just feel that they are losing control of their goods.
Right. So how do you convince them? Why do they
why
work with you in the end?
City Depot is very good at seeing what is the easiest way to get in their business. And so they try to see what are the small problems that they can provide a solution. For example, the waste. Every shop has waste. And if you're a small shop, you don't have a contract with big waste receiver, so it's a problem for you. Every day you have cartoon, plastic, and you don't know what to do with that. City Depot says, we are going into your street every day. We can take your waste, it's gratis, it's for free. But you can see us, we can take that, but you know we can also deliver your things if you want. And also they were trying to get the invoices. A shop sometimes use the post to send their goods to the customers via e-shopping, but also sometimes just for that. And City Depot goes to them and say, we can gather all the goods from all your streets, and we can get you a better price for the invoice, that if you go yourself to the post office, you wait a long time to do that, and you get a price which is higher than ours. Just use it. And so they are trying to keep these contacts further and further, and the clients become clients.
Yeah.
And also they try to use the early adopters, people who are convinced that they have to change something, and they are a bit powerful in their neighborhood. You know, it's a leader. And they are using this as an entry to the shopkeepers.
Okay. Birgit, during the workshops, did you meet partners or people who didn't want to go along in the end?
I don't think we have met people who, at least we don't know in the end, because the project ends, but we will continue working on optimizing city logistics. And there's always a difference between the ones that are early adapters, are very eager to change, but because they have something, they have their own drive to change, and others, they're very late movers. And I think we've seen all kinds of in the workshops. So some were very enthusiastic and want to act. And others are going to wait and see what's happening, and then after a while they will join. And it takes time, because changing behavior takes time.
But the workshops show that to meet with people face to face to convince them is important.
Yes, it is important. It is important to hear what drives people around the table to act, to understand why they act the way they do. For instance, if the shopkeeper is around the table acting the way Christophe is mentioning, and there are others, like for instance the local government, who's picturing the whole of the problems we have. We have hundreds of, or thousands maybe, individual decision makers on logistics in the city, and all together they make a mess. But everyone apart, they don't feel responsible. But if you can see the whole of the picture and it creates some awareness, that's the first step towards behavior change. If you know what's happening, and if you know what you're adding towards the whole of the picture, then you can think about it, and you can get off your habits or your irrational decisions and make them a little bit more rational.
Okay. Do you want to add something to that, Nigel?
I agree with Birgit in what she said. For a start, that was important. Yes, I've heard quite a few times somebody saying, oh, it's only one van. Yeah, you're one van, and then there's 2.5 million other vans in the UK. So if you take your one and all the 2.4999, you get the picture. So I definitely agree with that. I've got one example. When I was wandering around the London boroughs, Camden and the other 3 that we have in our project, I found an old screen, the one that used to roll up, and it was dated 1980, and it was still sealed, but on the outside label it had urgent next day delivery. So we need to push back and with opportunity for procurement savings, see the opportunity for saying we don't want this platinum service, as my boss calls it. We want to reduce service and to get some savings back.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question? I'm not sure I did.
Of course, during each of the sessions, we would like to hear from you as well and give you the opportunity to ask questions. So the experts are here. Please go ahead. Does anyone have a question as to behavior change or about any of the pilots here? Tara's there with a microphone, so we won't eat you. Nobody has any question? Over there. Okay. Could you please maybe stand up, tell us who you are and who you want to direct the question to?
All right, good morning. My name is Philippe Lebeau. I'm coming from the Vrije Universiteit Brussels. I'm having a question here regarding that debate around behavior change. I see that we say that yes, we need change. We need to think in a different way. We need to have collaboration. We need to involve more stakeholders. I completely agree with this direction. Now I would like to think also a bit from the past and what has been done so far until today. And my question is kind of general to maybe who wants to answer that question. How have you seen things evolving these last years in terms of engaging stakeholders in city distribution? Is it like really a boom for the moment in every different cities in Europe, or? Yes, well, I just wanted to have some reflections on that.
What's the question?
Yeah, it's a question. Well, the question is if there's really, if we're reaching yes or no kind of point of no return here. Is there really a boost in, do we already see a boost in changing the logistics into the cities or not just yet? Nigel?
We are here in the most congested major city in the whole of Europe, and London, one of the other partners, I'm sure Paris is the same, but London is the second most congested. And I think there is a really strong adrenaline at the moment towards, we can't just talk about doing something about sustainable city logistics. We really have to act now. So I think we are in that kind of boom, as it were, as you said.
Okay.
In Brussels also, we've seen with Frank that now the transporter, they are quite easy to convince because they are having more and more difficulties to deliver in Brussels. And so they are ready to change. For the shopkeepers, it depends on what is happening. And now in Brussels, we have this special case that we will pedestrianize a whole part of the city. And now the shopkeepers are saying, oh, we will have a problem. But we heard about LaMiLo. That's a good thing because we came just 6 months before that. And we had a very, very strong support also for the authority, the municipal authority of Brussels as supporting us very, very much. And so there is a momentum, part because of LaMiLo. Okay. And they were thinking about this pedestrianization, but a bit reluctant. And when they've seen that we can bring a solution, they said, okay, go for it. Mm-hmm. So it's really moving in Brussels now.
Yes. Frank or Lieven, do you feel that the times are changing and that there's a kind of momentum now because you're less involved in LaMiLo, of course?
For sure, the time for change is here. Just to give you an example, our storage facilities is located less than 10 kilometers out of the center of Brussels. When we have to deliver a pallet or some pallets, it takes us more than 1 hour to get into the center of Brussels. It gets us more than 1 hour to get out of the center of Brussels, so it's not realistic anymore. So the time of the question is, do we need to change, or have we an alternative? My belief is that in at a certain moment, perhaps the coming years, the coming 2 years, the local government will really limit the access of Brussels. Only a limited number of vehicles, limited.
It's
number
already happening now, eh?
It's
right now.
Yeah, but even more than now. So, if we want to continue, if we want to secure our operations, safeguard our operations in general, we have to change. We have to accept that continuing the way we did it for 10 years, 20 years is not the way forward, and we have to change.
Lieven Deketele?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you see that happening. Now, one thing I said is important also is that there's a few early adopters. There's a few. I mean, the feeling of having control I heard here is both at the receiver and at the shipper side. I think part of the reluctance you see is that people feel, yeah, but if I trust someone else to do my deliveries, where I give up control. And the only way you can give up control, you do it gradually. You start a little bit, and I think I see that happening now with the initiatives I see around us, where you really see that, okay, and once you prove in these examples that something works, then I think it can go quite fast. And I think we're at that pivotal point now where you really see some executions making sense. I think they're also moving away from, let's say, the only environmental idea, and actually tying together with that a true business model with a service context. I think Binnenstad Service did that too. I hear that in Brussels it's also happening. They look at what are the real problems of the shopkeepers. And the problem is we have waste. And maybe in our solution we take waste. I heard, I mean, they're having problems also with how do we acquire things, how can we get it. And once you create that situation where you show that something is working and that although you give up control, you don't lose control because someone does it actually better than you, that is the moment where it really starts taking off. And I do believe that the only way to do that is you cannot do that, like Christophe was saying, a lot of discussion in Brussels in the past. It's only when it really starts happening. And I think also the government has a role to play in creating boundary conditions which do some forcing maybe at some point. Or so that's the moment where it starts happening, and where I think as a logisticians, as supply chain, we all start thinking on how can this go. I see really, I mean, that is now, I think for people like Birgit and others who are a long time in it, finally there is momentum where it's really taking off.
So a key condition is also trust.
Yeah.
Trust that the consolidation center will work, that it will not make mistakes. Is that difficult at the beginning to hold that pledge, not to make any mistakes for suppliers, consumers, end users?
In Brussels, the numbers are good. We have a reliability about 98% with City Depot. So if you speak with the managers of the transport company, they see it, they say it's okay, we go for it, it's a good idea. But the problem is that if the management decides something, you still have to convince the operational guy who is really doing the job and who knows who is doing the job now and what will be in the future. The trust is maybe difficult to find there. So you have to convince every step of the chain, and that's difficult.
Wim, I think we have a question here.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Freya den Brink. I'm here on behalf of the Psychologistics project, which is kind of the same as the LaMiLo project, also, but more focused on cycling as a solution for city logistics. I actually have two questions. One is on consumers, the end user side, and one is about the logistics operators. So my first question is that I have the impression of the LaMiLo project that more logistics operators were involved. At the Psychologistics project, we are thinking to create awareness with the end users, so the consumers, and we were thinking about creating a label. So every time when the cycle couriers deliver a package, then they will put a label on the package that it is delivered by bike to create awareness with the end users.
Good idea.
Do you think this is an interesting way to create behavior change with the consumers? And my other question was for the logistics operators. Mr. Lieven Deketele talked about looking at the future. I was wondering if the logistics operators also incorporate the fact that there might be a toll system coming up. Also in Belgium, I've seen it already in Milan, for example, Area C. Do you anticipate on this this might be happening as well, for example, in Belgian cities?
Okay, let's take the second question first, then for Lieven.
First of all, I'm part of a fast-moving consumer goods company, so I mean it's a bit difficult to look. But I think what we take into account is how do we look at what is a sustainable future. And a sustainable future is taking into account what everyone calls internalization of external costs. There is an element of cost currently where, I mean, at least how it's paid for, it's either not paid for, like with real external costs, or the distribution is untransparent. And I think what helps a lot, and I think that's a bit also the idea you try to bring with the first question and the first idea, is how do we make it more transparent? Now, the thing is, what and I'm going to answer a bit also the second question on that, is what I think as a consumer then, and I'm now talking as a consumer, I sometimes lack is indeed the visibility on that logistics part. Now, I would even challenge sometimes, maybe don't bother me too much with maybe how the logistics is, but at least enable me with giving me choices on how I can receive my parcels, and actually then you will take me into a logic, because I also don't believe that even consumers, and I mean we're involved also in a project from the Flanders Logistics Institute, which is looking at what are consumers really wanting, and what you see there is that consumers, if you offer them the choice, you can get it if you pay €10 tomorrow, or you get it for free, which is free, as we all know, does not exist, but in 4 days, a majority shifts to the longer time period. So this is a moment where you also try to involve me as a user in the solution, and you don't get the urgent delivery with maybe someone else, give it to me, I mean, we can deliver you tomorrow, but then you deliver it to me when I'm not at home. And well, I don't have it tomorrow, so then I prefer maybe a day where I can get it. So I think it's looking in the future means that looking transparently, seeing what is really the cost I cause, and how can we go to the lowest cost, environmental and economical and social, as an entire solution. And
what about the label as a solution for more transparency? Birgit?
I think it's a great idea. In fact, we've already considered that. But what we have learned in our, what we call the freight circle, which Max presented earlier this morning, what we've learned is you can raise awareness amongst the people living in the neighborhoods, but we can give them a steering wheel to act in a different way, because we say to them, you change your address and use our depot's address, and everything comes in at our depot, and we can cycle around and deliver the stuff and put a sign on it. That's great, but Koen is going to talk about that later on today. We are creating an environmental sustainable case, but we are not creating a financial sustainable case, because the end receiver is not, maybe he's going to pay €10, maybe he's going to pay nothing, we don't know. And I'm certainly not going to send an invoice for €10, because it's going to cost me €50 to send an invoice and check it, and I'm going to receive 10. So that's not a sustainable financial business case. So, and we really need this transparency all over the whole of the chain, and not only change the end receiver, we need to change everybody's behavior in the chain in order to really make a substantial impact. Of course, we can cycle around, we do. And we cycle around zero emission. But the vans of all the parcel delivery companies are still running around as well. So we have to create more impact, and then the whole of the chain needs to change. But yes, I think consumer power it's very interesting to change the rest and creating awareness amongst web shops, shippers, logistics service providers, and so on. So, and creating awareness, the sign on the parcel is really one of them. Yeah, good idea.
Yeah. I was just going to add on the pricing for goods, where there's no delivery cost or where it says free delivery, and everyone knows it isn't, but suppliers and manufacturers might use that to try and encourage somebody to purchase. But it's really important that we all ask those suppliers, and if we're doing procurement, we say we want the product price, and then tell us the delivery price, and also tell us, if we deliver to a consolidation centre, because we need to know when we're going to these suppliers or retailers, that's how much you're charging for delivery, really, and we want to have a reduced delivery, so this is how much we can try and negotiate to get back as a saving to pay for the logistics costs.
We're going to talk about that in the second session, financial sustainability, after the break, and we'll break now. Unless there's another question, I want to give you the opportunity. Yes, one more here in the front. Koen. Koen van Heusen from the Foreign Trade Agency in Belgium.
Yes. I had one question regarding behavior change. One of the first slides was here on the digital agenda. And one element of digital agenda is getting people to buy on the internet and getting consumers to buy on the internet. Now, if European legislation imposes on suppliers a landed cost, an all-in cost, how will you ever get a consumer in that legal framework to say, I'm going to shift my address somewhere else if by law the supplier is obliged to provide with an all-in cost? It will create a double cost, and it will not reduce logistics in the cities. So my question is, how do you combine both?
Good question.
Good question.
Who has the answer?
And the lady who was supposed to answer was over there, I think.
Is this something we should talk about maybe during the next session? Because it's a financial question, right?
Let's keep it in mind.
Say something about that. Frank, I don't know if you have any ideas on that.
I think it's a good question to think about and to reflect, because I have not the answer right now.
Okay.
I mean, Amazon is a good example, because Amazon decided to split out the delivery cost, and then other retailers saw that when people are looking at the Amazon price and looking at theirs, suddenly theirs looked more expensive. So if there was a few big players started to change the pricing and put a delivery cost down, apparently retailers are moving away from providing a delivery service and encouraging click and collect, because it actually costs them more money to do the deliveries. So I don't know whether that answers your question at all, but
okay,
we tried.
All about financial issues in the next session. We'll talk also about environmental and social sustainability. Yep. Thank you for now, Frank van Steijvoort, Lieven, Deketele, Birgit, Hendriks, Christophe, Voghel, and Nigel Symonds. Thank you. And we'll break. We'll meet again at midday, 12.